What's going on, everyone? In this video, I'm going to be sharing with you guys how to build an offer that sells in 2025. Now, if you're in the info, e-learning, coaching space, you probably have already witnessed that this year has probably been the hardest for most coaching business to sell at the same volume that they once were. And if you're a new coaching business, you've probably dealt with a lot of extreme adversities right off the bat. And so specifically, we're going to be diving into the current market conditions that are causing it to be so difficult to generate the same sales volume you probably once were or trying to get to. And we're also going to talk about what's the difference between the companies that are in the top 1% that are thriving and consistently growing month over month and year over year versus companies that are struggling. And then we'll tie it all in with the solution of what you can do today inside of your coaching business, directly inside of your offer specifically, to take back some of that market share and get closer to that top 1% of the market. Now, before we dive into all of that, just really quickly, if you're new here, to introduce myself, I've been in this space for the last 7 years and we've grown multiple brands to 10 million a year. We've went through multiple market and sales cycles, and we've seen it all from top to bottom. And we've generated over 62 million across different coaching businesses to date. And so what we're working towards today is we're partnered with a few coaching businesses that are pacing to do 10 to 30 million this year. And our goal is to scale a few of those to 100 million a year in the next 12 to 18 months. Now, why I'm sharing all of this? Realistically, just to document my journey and share all the wins and losses as we're on this journey to scale these companies. There's a lot of lessons I wish I had handy when I was coming up, and I'd like to just share that with more people that are starting off in this space or just on their entrepreneurial journey. And then a cool perk of this is we just get to meet cool people and build some strong relationships. So that's really about it. But diving right into the video. So current market conditions. There's two elements when it comes to the market conditions that we'll look at. The first one is offers, and the second one is prospects, right? The people that are buying from you, and then what's being offered in the info coaching landscape today, right? So looking at offers first, the first thing that I'm noticing across this industry right now is that a couple of years ago, you could have the same offer as most other people, and you'd still be able to sell just as much volume and be able to hit your goals and make millions of dollars. It'd be super easy. And I think saturation is one big part to this, where there's a lot more creators stepping in. There's a lot more people offering a similar product. And so most products, usually the ones that were selling a couple of years ago at a really well level, are struggling today because they, to be honest, didn't really evolve or shift or adjust to the landscape that came, right? So most of the time, there's nothing unique about your offer, right? And so your offer, if it looks too similar to your competitors or people that are in your niche, most of the time, people are only going to be buying stuff from you because of your personal brand, which isn't a bad thing. And I'd want to touch on this a little bit more clearly. If you look at a traditional business outside of the coaching e-learning space, the idea behind those businesses to accumulate some actual asset value comes from you being able to sell without your face or name being attached to it. And this is a common problem in the creator-led businesses where your face is what's actually selling, not the same old course, curriculum, community, the traditional stuff that you see inside of like a coaching info offer, right? And so again, initially, this isn't a bad thing, but if your business isn't wired or geared towards selling without you being present, then eventually that is going to become your Achilles heel, and it's going to affect you when you try to scale, because you can only sell to a certain level with your involvement directly as the personal brand. So when you're starting out, it's a great way to get that first launch pad. But if you are stuck here forever and you are relying too much on your personal brand specifically, and you can't build moats around the brand itself to sell, then that's where it's going to become a lot harder to scale beyond that 8-figure level, right? And so this is a common pattern you've probably noticed across my videos or even future videos that we'll talk about in terms of what it takes to scale from 6 figures to 7 figures and 7 to 8 figures, and then even 8 to 9 figures, which is a whole different level of a thing. But each level requires a different version of the business from all different departments, and the offer or product being one of them, right? And so shifting into prospects, the people that are buying from us, let's try to understand where they are right now in the market, right? And so again, prospects a few years ago, because there was less volume of info creator-led products being out there, they were more open to purchasing. And so now, because there's usually, most of the time we hear this on calls, we hear this on email replies, we get messages from people, they have a lot of fear and there's a lack of trust. I think that's something everyone can say as a common denominator. That's really declined, especially from, I think, 2024 all the way to now, and it's only going further down. And we'll talk about it in a second of what the top 1% are doing to overcome this and do a better job. However, this is the state that we're living in right now. And most of the time it's coming from what we've heard specifically from prospects and leads from different markets, is that usually they've had experiences, usually 1 or 2 is the common one, or more, that are similar to the company or the offer that you're trying to sell. And this is why being unique and standing out is such a crucial part, because they didn't live up to the expectations they set, right? And so the problem here is that if you're not able to differentiate yourself, and I hear there's something very similar to an experience that I had was bad last time, I'm probably going to have my red flags and sirens start alerting. And that's what's happening to a lot of prospects. They hear something promised to them that was very similar to where they didn't have the best experience, and that's making them question everything about what you've said. It may have been a buzzword, it may have been a keyword that you mentioned that triggered something, but a lot of the times that's what's happening psychologically, right? And so the other thing is people are just more smarter buyers. They have more awareness around purchasing decisions today because, again, they've probably went through so many different experiences, right? So there's a lot of choices. There's a lot of saturation, too many offers, and all of them look like the one right next to each other. So it's like, which one do I want to choose from? And again, usually the decision just ends up coming from which brand or face do I have the biggest kind of connection or trust with, right? And there's also, again, just a lot of noise. More people sharing negative experiences than positive ones, making more people skeptical of like online info, courses in general, right? So that's where we are today, right? Now let's talk about where the top 1%, what are they doing that's allowing them to have such a high success, right? You see these companies that are doing $1 million, $3 million, $4 million a month. But what are they doing differently than you, right? And ultimately, at least for the brands that we've worked with specifically, our main goal is positioning, right? And what I mean by that, and this is a big thing a lot of brands undermine or don't understand properly, is that, let me just pull this here, your high ticket should not be a commodity. Most of the time when we're looking at high ticket products, they look like a book that I could just pull off a shelf and just buy at a checkout. That's not what high ticket should feel like, right? It's a very tailored, customized experience that most of the time you're charging a lot of money for, right? So everyone has a different definition of high ticket, but let's just say a common denominator of anything that's above 3, 4, 5K, right, is considered high ticket. And so most of the time, usually brands are selling this thing very similar to a low ticket offer or something that they could just buy from a store off the shelf. And that's not the perception we want people to have about such a high effective product. Granted, I'm assuming you have your product and fulfillment all dialed in and you're producing great results for people. It should not be something that you are forcing and desperately pushing down people's throats. And what I mean by that, I'll show you an example, is if you look at the best brands in the space, they don't have their best products on display, right? If you go to stores like Hermes, Louis Vuitton, like these are some of the brands, Rolex, any sort of high luxury brand, if you look at their top tier, most expensive products, you're probably not even going to find them in the store. You're going to have to go to the rep, probably ask them where they can find this product. But that's because there's so much buzz and demand externally. People already know that this product exists, but they know that to get their hands on it, they have to work really hard. They have to earn it. So how does this work in high ticket and coaching? Well, you want to make sure that when someone is ready and mentally prepared to purchase, that's the only time they get to see this high ticket offer you have. But if it's plastered in every single ad, if it's plastered in every single video, and you're constantly doing CTAs, and it's just this thing that you hear over and over and over again, and you're like, I have 5 seats left or 10 seats left, I have limited seats. Like all of those things are played out. Like that's something that probably could have worked a few years ago, and it has worked really, really well. But for most brands doing this today, it's only hurting your positioning. Your value as a brand is going down each time you make a call to action. And this is those second order consequences, which we'll probably get into in a second, that most brands don't see, right? It's not something that you see today, but it's going to come into an effect tomorrow, kind of like a domino effect, right? And so that being said, what you want to do is making sure to position your high ticket offer to only be exposed to the people that are inside of your funnel or flywheel that are ready to purchase. Someone that just entered your ecosystem should not get plastered with your high ticket offer, because the chances of them buying right away is going to be very slim anyway. So there's no purpose of you showing this off to them. Your goal with this person at the top of your funnel should only be to build trust, which we'll talk about in a second, how to do that. However, this offer should only be exposed to these people that are ready in the buyer's pocket. And so this could require a whole video on itself, but ultimately this is what comes down to the highest brands being able to sell when everyone else is struggling and making CTAs or call to actions or really pushing this to people that are not ready or in the position to buy, right? And so the other thing is to look at it, right? If you're high ticket, and most of the time this is for most education businesses or coaching businesses, usually your high ticket is producing the most volume of sales when it comes to your business. So I'm imagining if you have a low ticket or a mid ticket, and you look up the funnel of the ladder of this, usually these, and again, everyone's definition of mid to high ticket could be very different, but usually this is producing the most cash for most people, right? And then maybe there's like an extreme higher ticket over here that's even more expensive for these people that some brands do, but usually this is going to be the main kind of flagship offer that you have. And so if that's the main offer you have that's going to bring in the most amount of cash for your business, you want to make sure you treat it the right way. And so it's just a mirror of like the way you treat this offer is the same way the prospect's going to treat it. And so if you treat it like a commodity and you sell it like a commodity, people are going to treat it like that. And that's why you probably deal with so many objections on sales calls or through whatever your sales process is. People will be more reluctant to buy from you, right? So what's the goal here, right? The goal ultimately is you want prospects coming to you and asking you, how can they get access to this offer? And when you can achieve that level of demand, now you potentially never really have to chase any people to purchase from you. Now, following up and sales processes, that's a whole different thing. But when I say chase, I mean having to constantly tell people about your offer over and over and over again, where they're just sick and tired of it and they aren't ready. They never were ready, but because you sold them or gave them some sort of messaging or content tailored to a position or in the buyer's journey that they were not in originally, you've basically built that distrust with them now, where even if they were going to buy from you a couple months down the line, they're probably not now, right? So there's a lot of factors that, again, these are those second order, third order consequences that we don't see because most businesses in the coaching space usually run off a P&L or balance sheet, where it's more so we got to make X amount of posts and we got to drive X amount of traffic, and that's totally fine. But not everything shows up on the balance sheet. And these are second order consequences that you can't really track, but you can see the repercussions of them years after the buildup of it, which is why most businesses in the coaching space don't last more than a year or two, right? Or never really reach that 7-figure mark consistently. So that's ultimately the reason why these brands are winning. Now, how do you do this for yourself, right? Let's go over here to the solution. So over here, same thing. We'll talk about those two things that we talked about in the beginning of this video over here, the offers and the prospect, because these are the two things that you're solving for in order to make sure that your product could be sold at a higher level, right? So we have to fix the offer and we have to cure the prospect's fear, if you want to call it, right? So to fix the offer, the first thing that we have to focus on is what can you provide that no one else can, right? And this is something that I see really often, and this is why I'm going to list it here, is offering one-on-ones. And this is back to that thing that we talked about in the beginning over here, right? Where'd it go? Right? Personal brand. If your offer is too tied to your personal brand, meaning it requires you to be there visibly to sell and fulfill this, you could do that, but it is going to limit you at a certain level. And so again, to start off, not a bad idea. If you're starting off and you need to build social proof, I usually encourage this because it's something that you can start to see if people even want this. Do you even want to scale something like this, right? But if you don't have a plan to get out of the one-on-one or replace the one-on-one, or if you were to remove that from your value or offer stack, would people still buy at the same level? And if the answer is no, that means we need to figure out what can we do that no one else can to supplement this, right? So my biggest thing is I've always looked for inspiration outside of the niche. And if you try to replicate too much of what everyone else is doing, you're just going to become another mirror version of them. And so the best thing that you can really do is look outside, see why some coaching businesses can charge $50K plus and have the most happy customers, but you sometimes can struggle to sell a $5,000 product without people complaining that they're not getting enough attention or support or whatever your fulfillment or promises are, right? But there are companies, and I kid you not, I've seen a lot where they're charging $250K plus and they're able to make sure that they have happy customers. People are loving it. The experience is great. It's usually most of the time that I see that there's no level of forced thinking. You really want to push yourself to really focus on how you can do something that no one else can, right? And if you really try to factor in and build something unique to yourself that it's very hard for someone else to replicate in your industry, you'll immediately start to notice a difference on sales calls and the sales volume, right? Now, two ways to do this, going a little bit more deeper, right, is that every prospect, like we discussed, is expecting a course, they're expecting webinars, they're expecting a community, right? So when we're looking at how you can do something else that no one does, what can you do on top of this, right? Because these are all predominantly expected to the market nowadays. Everyone can offer this, right? And yes, you have maybe a better course, maybe you have a better quality, maybe you offer more webinars, maybe you offer a better community. Totally cool, and I can understand all of that, but there's also a level of like, what else do you have on top of that, which is why people are interested nowadays, specifically. And so we have to work just that much harder to figure out, okay, well, what can we do on top of this that we already have to get you to your goal, right? The second thing that I've noticed is many offers don't have clarity, right? So you could have a bunch of different features and benefits and everything that's included with the offer. But usually what I'm noticing a lot of the time, when you have too much to offer and you don't do a good job clarifying how it's going to take you from A to point Z, whatever those points are for you, people will have a tough time trusting or buying you this product because they don't know how this is clearly going to get to their goal, right? And so sometimes we need to figure out how can we really simplify our value proposition, right? If they can't see a clear roadmap to their goals, that means your value proposition isn't clear. So these are all questions that you can ask yourself about your offer and test to see the bulletproofness of where you stand in the market today, right? And then finishing off, the two lenses that you want to look for, to just give you guys a little bit more actionable advice here, is that if you look at it from this lens, there's only two things you can do realistically when you boil it all down that people will pay crazy amounts of money for, right? It's access and customization. The challenging part of this is making sure that you can do this without making it a scale issue. And back to that thing at the top over here, the one-on-one time that I can offer someone, that's a very quick fix that everyone, and I've seen many brands lean towards. And it's, again, not a bad approach, but eventually it's going to catch up to you at scale, right? Where probably your time is better spent doing something else than actually doing one-on-ones to float the business's revenue, right? And so how do you figure out how to give people more access to you without diluting your time? And how do you make it more customized to them? Everyone loves a tailored suit. Everyone's going to pay more for a tailored suit and a tailored experience. That's just how we're wired, right? And everyone's going to want to pay for more access and proximity to you, right? That's why, Grant Cardone, Tony Robbins, and these guys can charge $250,000 for a half an hour or an hour of their time, because they're not saying or truthfully doing anything radical on that session. They're really just giving people reconfirmation on that. People just want some level of customization and access. Now, again, that is a very extreme case, and that goes back to people offering one-on-one. However, the best companies that I've noticed that have been able to scale over time have been able to curate an experience for their prospect that no one else has seen or heard. Usually the expression you get from people when you tell them that this is your offer is like, oh my God, I've never heard or seen anything like this before. And then the second thing is they actually walk away with a great experience and they have pretty much little to no objections, right? So this is when we actually boil down what a no-brainer offer is. This is what it comes down to. And again, that just comes down to also you doing a lot more forced thinking inside of your business and challenging yourself to put these variables and puzzle pieces together, right? So that's for offers, how you can fix your offer today, right? Now for the prospect, and curing their symptom of fear comes from a couple things, right? So the main one is time. They spend more time with you, right? Usually you never see someone marrying someone on the first date. And that's because they want to spend time, get to know the person. And then eventually, if the relationship is good enough, maybe they one day get to that point, right? But the more time someone can spend with you, the more trust they can build. The more money someone spends with you, and this is a double-edged sword if done incorrectly, but the more money someone spends with you, usually if they spent money with you once and they had a great experience, they're going to spend it again with you. And again, as long as you can have always something to offer to them, usually a person will always want to keep coming back to a place that they had a great experience, because quite frankly, that's a big drought in the market right now. There's not many offers that provide a great experience. There are a few notable ones, but many don't, right? And that's part of the, again, 1% and how you can tap into that level of brands, right? But that's ultimately two ways to cure it. Now, here's the thing about where we are in the market today. Specifically, if we look at both of them, right? In this market today, yes, people can spend a lot of time with you, but as we notice from most people in this space that are trying to scale at a very aggressive level, and they're trying to get to a mark in the next 12, 18, 24 months, whatever it is, usually time is not on our side, and most brands don't want to wait. Some are more comfortable, have longer sales cycles, others have shorter ones. Really just depends on the cadence we've noticed over time, right? But what it comes down to is, in this market, it takes a lot more time. Maybe 2 years ago, what could have taken someone 30 days to make a buying decision for like a 5K offer probably takes 3 to 6 months now, right? And so as a business, you want to figure out how can you find ways for people to spend more time with you. So that comes down to community, content, and really just being creative with that, right? But if people can spend more time with you and they're less repulsive, and that doesn't mean you're selling to them as they're spending time with you. That means just genuinely building a relationship with these people. You can curate a community and a cult-like audience that will buy from you eventually. And that will be that initial spark or demand you need for your best customers. And in my opinion, and this goes for not just, and this is why I like to borrow a lot of principles from other businesses and bring it into the coaching and e-learning landscape, because part of this industry being so easy that you can just whip up a Google Doc with an offer and start selling right away is the reason why there's such a gap between the top 1% of companies and the other 99%. And so usually it's because there's so many other barriers. If, for example, you were starting a company like Tesla, you could just imagine how hard, and you hear stories of, the different patents and the permits and the regulations and the laws and all of that stuff. But if you look at business like Tesla specifically, for every Tesla that's sold, 1 out of every 3 person comes from a referral or word of mouth. Now, if you have an army of people that speak very highly of you, you'd be surprised the compound interest that has over time, over the years, especially when you're trying to grow at a massive level. Because as you grow, your cost to acquire a customer is probably going to jump. Margins are probably going to slim, right? And so when you have this as like a moat, a lot of those factors kind of get diminished, right? And so that's a higher level view of this. But ultimately, what it comes down to, again, just figuring out how you can spend more time with these people, build a relationship with them. The second thing is money, or spend specifically, in this market is more constricted. A couple of years ago, people would probably be more open to spending a few $1,000s right away with a new coaching offer or brand. Now, most people just want to test your ecosystem. Do they even like what you have to offer, right? And that may start for some people on your Instagram content, your Twitter, YouTube, all of that stuff. And so right now, probably the main funnel for organic brands, creating content on these platforms, and usually the people that have the highest leverage, the highest quality of an audience, meaning you have a lot of depth. Because again, just talking about this specifically a little bit more, volume over here could be just a vanity metric. Just because you have more subscribers or views does not mean you can produce more sales, right? And so when you have a combination of volume and quality combined together, that's what actually starts being a lot more of an asset to the business, right? But usually people are judging you based on your content here, their perception of you from your Instagram, X, YouTube, whatever platform you're on, right? And then if there's too much of a gap and your high ticket is here and they're still stuck over there, there's too much constriction here for me to just jump into this high ticket, right? And this is where we're noticing right now, there's a lot more people or brands that are working with low ticket offers to get people into your ecosystem to then build that trust and make that bridge a lot more effective for people to get to high ticket, right? So that's the stepping stones in terms of getting people to spend more money with you. But usually what you also have to do is when people are spending more money with you, you have to make sure, especially in the initial stages, and this is where content also becomes a huge factor as well. Doesn't also just have to be in terms of money. Currency comes in the form of like the respect and the attention and pull you can get from your YouTube, your X, your Instagram. If your perception over here is not the best, you selling something on top of that isn't going to help you, right? So it always starts from the seed that you plant. If you want this to grow to that massive tree you want one day, you want to make sure that the content you're putting out is unique, it's valuable, and you're putting the prospect's best interest first. And so you have to over deliver from the first medium, and you have to water this seed the most when you first plant it. right? And you have to keep doing that through each stage. Usually what happens, and I see this sometimes even on the front lines of like just content, usually you'll see people that don't put enough energy or the right intention behind this content to actually really comes down to really just providing value and leaving people with a great experience for whatever niche you're in. But if you can't do that to a high level, usually that's going to be the judgment of what your brand is perceived to most people. So if this is done correctly, and then the step after that is done correctly, and so on and onwards, all the way to your highest ticket product, usually that's going to be what places you in the top 1%. But you'll notice sometimes that brands might have some great content, but then they'll take a shortcut here and they'll launch a quick product to try to accelerate the runway to high ticket, but they'll do it with the false intention of upgrading someone right away and not making sure that this is actually good of a product or fulfillment. And that will automatically just, the distrust is created there, right? So the moral of the story here is that you want to make sure that from the minute someone finds you through whatever channel or medium, that they're able to walk through the door all the way and they're able to make it to the high ticket by having the best experience all the way through, right? And if there's any shortcut made there, you'll notice that's where either sales are going to dip, conversion rates are going to drop, and it's going to be, again, those second order consequences that we don't see today, but those dominoes will eventually fall in a couple months or a year. And you'll always need to, when you deal with those type of, every time you take a shortcut and you deal with those type of setbacks, you will have to come back to square one and regress, which is also another thing that most brands or businesses don't want to do because it feels like you're losing or you're declining, but sometimes it's needed. And if you don't do it soon enough and you don't regress when you need to, based on where you're at, you might end up costing your reputation or your business, and it might get even more detrimental than you think, right? So ultimately, those are the two main things that you can do. And these are not overnight tactics. These are not things that you can just splur up. These are things that require a lot of deep thinking and focus in order for you to nail. And the more energy you put into both of these, the reward you're going to see on the other side as a reflection. Everything's a mirror. And so inputs, outputs, right? Now, again, basically the same thing here. You just have to over deliver. That's the main thing all the way through. And even when you get to the high ticket, you always want to under promise and over deliver. And when you create that combination, people will always respect you and have a higher kind of, I guess you can say, appealingness to your brand, right? So finishing off, the one last thing that I'll leave you guys with, and this wasn't really part of the video itself, but it's just this mindset that we can embody through everything we've talked about today. And that's to adopt being different, right? Differentiate in every interaction you have, from the content, from the marketing, sales, to fulfillment, and literally every little mini thing between, from the minute someone finds you all the way till the last second of them not even just finishing off in the sales process, but to them even going through your fulfillment, right? And so when you are able to look at your business and you see that 99% of the space or your competition, this really goes for any business, not even just coaching businesses, for your personal brand, when you see so many people going in this direction, it might be uncomfortable to think about going in this direction and going left when everyone's going right. But long term, usually that's the right choice because you're going to always be the brand that stands out. That usually is the first mover, and you're the brand that usually all the other brands will try to replicate, right? And you'll notice that some of the top brands, by the time you start to replicate what they're doing, they're already on to the next wave of things and they're already ahead of the curve. And by the time you reach to that point, they're already on to the next thing. And so evolution is just part of the game, right? And so most brands that I've seen don't function from that mentality. And so if you can really rewire your mind and the business's North Star to being different and also hitting all the marks in terms of fulfillment, getting people results, and all that other good stuff that is required to grow this thing, you're going to see the most growth. So that's pretty much it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments what else you guys would like to see, and I'll be making more of these. So I'll see you guys in the next one.